My mother used to take me to the grocery store when I was 2. And you know the carts you put the kid in with a seat where you can't escape and all that stuff. She said she'd forget something and go over to the aisle next to it. She said she'd come back. I'd be down on the floor. I'd have a crowd of people around me, and I'd be doing hound dog with all the gyrations. 2 years old. So she should have known then what I was going to do for a living. Yes, sir.
How did you stay motivated when you were trying to break through when you first came
See
to California?
previous answer. I mean, show business doesn't. You don't choose it; it chooses you. And show business is not looking for people that want to do this; looking for people that must do this. And I've often said the greatest thing anybody can be blessed with is an obsession. And it's kind of like you put on the shoes, and the shoes do the walking for you. You're just going along for the ride. And kids will come up and say, "Hey, man, give me some advice. How do I get into business?" And I just tell them, I go, "Listen, if you don't think you can live without it, go for it. Better to try and fail than turn 50 or 60 and look yourself in the mirror and go, well, I did because I didn't have the guts or the motivation or whatever." But on the other hand, if you think for one moment you can live without it, better seek another line of employment. Will not make it. This is not for the faint of heart. Yes, sir.
I've got 2 quick questions. The first question is, what song helped you find your signature vocal sound? Was there a certain song when you were younger, something you were listening to, that made you kind of latch on to that kind of distorted vocal that you have?
I was in a cover band when I was in high school, and I was playing. When I was 15, I was as tall as I am now, and I developed pretty early. I mean, by the time I was 16, I had a full-grown beard. So when I was 15, I had sideburns down here. I was playing with guys that were 10 years old, and so I was not singing lead at the time. I was singing 2 songs a night lead. We had another guy that was singing lead. Well, he got fired. I got thrown out of the boat, and it became my job. We were doing 63 songs a night in our repertoire. You start at 8 in the evening, go to 4 in the morning, you're going to develop something. And that's really where I learned it right there. I mean, the word that comes to mind is attrition. You get tough or die. And I don't think anybody really, well, I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but of the guys I know, nobody sets out to sound like anybody else. You just do your thing, and whatever comes out, comes out. So it really is no more complicated than that. I mean, in my particular case, like I said, it was baptism by fire.
My second question was kind of mirroring faith coming in and out. What was it that brought you back to that?
A search of 20 years. I call it my Lieutenant Dan moment.
Like a reflection?
Well, when he's up in the crow's nest and the hurricane's coming and Jerry Sinise shakes his fist at God and he goes, "It's you and me, right here, right now." Well, that was kind of what I did. And, I determined I was either going to get the monkey off my back or I was going to live with it. And I spent 6 months reading the New Testament, trying my best to disprove it. And I came to the conclusion after 6 months that Christ was either a liar, a lunatic, or he was the Lord. And I came to the conclusion he was the latter of the three. Yes, sir.
So I just got to thank you, first of all, for being the soundtrack to most of my life. But kind of following on his question, when you started becoming more, I guess, open in your lyrical theme with the spiritual part of it, were you getting a lot of encouragement or more discouragement?
Neither. I had this conversation with Alice Cooper a few years ago, and we both said that we were kind of aware early on in our early records that we were writing that stuff, but we didn't realize, neither one of us realized how overt it was until years later. Because he too was brought up in the same environment I was brought up in. So that influence is always going to be there. And like I said, for him, we compared notes, and it was almost like we were reading off the same script. So it really was no different. Yes, ma'am.
If you could form a super band today, who would you choose to be in your band?
Super bands go super egos.
Yeah.
It's hard to get them all in the same room at the same time. I have been in a situation, and I won't tell you when, but there was one point in my career where we were taking 4 different modes of transportation, 4 different dressing rooms, 4 different entrances and exits to the stage. We did not see each other until the lights went up for the show, and we did not see each other again until the lights went out and came on again for the next show. So to say that you're living a miserable existence is kind of like calling King Kong a monkey. It's.
Have you ever thought about playing with Vinnie Vincent?
I don't know him. I've never met him. I know people that have worked with him, and they have varying ideas of it. But to answer your question, yes, sir.
I don't have a question.
First to say Ukraine.
Yeah, Black and the Black Friday. Is
I know,
that any
right?
better?
Yeah.
There's so much material to choose from for fit into 2 hours. Yet the larger portion of it is from your first album. Can you comment on that, or?
We spent actually probably better part of a year trying to figure out what we were going to do in this. We started out with somewhere between 40 and 50 songs, and we just kept narrowing it down, narrowing it down. And quite honestly, it was not until the last day of rehearsal, before we did the first show in Las Vegas, that we settled on a set list. Because you're trying to take an average of what you think people are going to want to hear, but it's difficult. I've told this story before. You get some fans that want to hear obscure B-sides. And we did that once. We thought, okay, we'll try that and see what happens. And so we were in the Netherlands, and we went out and did 4 obscure B-sides. And died a horrible death right there. And I said, well, we did it, and we're never going to do this again. And so I said, all right, well, from now on, let's try to take an average of what you think people are going to want. Yes, sir.
Hey, Still Not Black Enough is one of your best albums, in my opinion. How did you like the way it turned out? And
I was a period in my life where I was lost as a goat.
right before KFD?
Yeah, because I had just come out of the Idol, and I was still in the glow or the shadow, of the Idol. I went into it with a fatal attitude, thinking there's no way I can top that previous record. And that's a bad starting spot.
It turned out awesome.
Well, it's better than now being able to look back on it. It's better than I gave it credit for. But it's kind of like, your mom told you when you're growing up, you never tell a lie, you never have to worry about telling the truth. If you're going through a situation where it's kind of like fumbling in the dark. You're reaching for something and you don't know what you're reaching for. I don't want to repeat the Idol. I can't repeat the Idol. So what do I do? So it wasn't until Chris and I got back together right after that record and we did KFD, I found myself again. So I think any artist you talk to is going to have moments like that where they're just kind of floating. They don't really know who they are or where they're going. I missed you in the back there.
Me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is Hollywood as horrific as most people say that are in the music industry, movie industry, and so on and so forth?
Can be.
Yeah.
Because
I know it'll break people.
Oh, it does. It's famous for it. You can't get a part without an agent. You can't get an agent without a part. How do you solve that conundrum? It is designed to weed people out and again, I'll use the word attrition. It's designed to weed people out who should not be there. Back in the 80s, there was a Hollywood Chamber of Commerce statistic that stated there was a teenage girl came to Hollywood once every 13 seconds. That did not include the guys or the guys and the girls over 20. That was just a teenage girl. And the average life expectancy was 6 months. Now that's not a mortality rate. That's just, before they packed up and went home. Because you gotta remember, these kids are all voted most likely to whatever in high school. And they all think they're gonna go to that place and bowl it over. And what they don't realize is they're dealing with every type A personality that is in the United States or around the world for that matter. And they all congregate in that place. And the competition is enormously fierce. And most of them, going back to the question that was asked earlier, when I was talking about show business doesn't choose you. I mean, you don't choose it, it chooses you. That's really what they find out. It's like, how do you endure? I lived in a closet that was 3 feet by 12 feet for over a year. And I recently heard George Clooney tell the same exact story. He was living about a mile away from me and I didn't know. He too was living in a closet for over a year. How many people are willing to do that and where you don't know where your next meal is coming from? I went for 3 years without gas and without electricity. That's a long time. And you don't know where your next meal is coming from. But you've got your eyes on the prize, and if you believe in yourself, the race does not always go to the swiftest. To me, I always looked at it like the tortoise in the hare. You beat me in a sprint, but I'll kill you in a marathon. So it really does come down to how badly somebody wants it, or do they think they can or cannot live it. It's that simple. Yes, sir.
I was reading Mickey Six's latest book, and he mentioned you were a Beatles fan. I just wondered, who's your favorite Beatle? What's your favorite Beatles album?
That's impossible to choose. Do you have kids?
No.
I would say pick your favorite kid, but that's impossible. I mean, we were in New York City last weekend, a week ago tonight actually, and we drove through the city, and we drove by the old Ed Sullivan Theater, and I told the guys, I said, "You see that theater right there? Where I grew up, as the crow flies, was 12 miles away from me, over at Staten Island. I was there when all that was going on. I was 7 years old. And the earthquake that it caused, there's never been anything like it before since. So, like I said, trying to decipher that or to differentiate or choose one, impossible.
Your favorite song?
I'm sorry, what?
Your favorite song? What's yours?
That's that desert island question that journalists ask us over. You gotta pick 5 records on desert island. It's whatever I'm in the mood in at the time. I mean, it's like I have average taste, like everybody else. I like the same movies, the same music, same food as everybody else. I'm real average, So I just think it's like whatever mood I'm in at the time. Yes, sir.
Hey, going back off the previous question, when you said you had your Lieutenant Dan moment when you decided to be, born again, did that have anything to do, like a lot of the songs that you wrote and performed, about world events and, current events and stuff like that that's gone on, 9/11?
Yeah, probably. But at the same time, you got to remember, we're in the Bible Belt here, so you guys know what it's all about. I had an uncle that was a preacher, and my dad was a Sunday school superintendent. My grandfather was a deacon, so every time the doors was open, I was there. So you grow up with that influence. But equally important, I think, with that is just me as being average. I'll watch TV, the same stuff that pisses me off pisses you off. I see injustices and I hate it. I can't stand it. And so if I'm motivated by it, especially motivated enough to write about it, there's a pretty fair chance it's going to resonate with you as well. So that I've often said I'm a musical reporter. I just observe what's going on. I write it down and make it rhyme. That's the only difference between me and any other journalist, really. Is I'm just making the words rhyme.
How many more tours do you think you got in you?
As long as I can do it at a high level. I don't see any end in sight, to be honest. When you see what I'm going to do out there tonight, for somebody in his mid-60s, it's going to be fairly impressive.
My dad when you coming back. He was my major.
Well, thank you for his service.
Thanks, I appreciate it. He passed away 8 years ago, but my question is, he was my major influence in my life. So, he was a huge influence. Who was yours?
My dad, but also Muhammad Ali. So between the two of them, and for different reasons, because there was different qualities of both of them. And I, like every other teenager, I went through that period. There's a famous quote Mark Twain talked about. He goes, when I was 15 years old, my dad was the dumbest son of a bitch that ever lived, and I was embarrassed to have him around my friends. But an amazing thing happened when I turned 21 years old, how much he had learned in 6 years. So there's a lot to be said for that, And my dad, I got my music from my mother. But my dad had a flamboyancy. My dad was from Georgia here, and grew up in Valdosta.
Really?
Hey! I have family still here in Georgia. We were talking about it earlier. My great-grandfather painted the first Coca-Cola sign.
Wow.
So I have roots here to a degree. But anyway, my dad he was changing a light bulb one day, and it was up on the roof. And I was holding the ladder for him, and he could be theatrical sometimes. And I'm holding the ladder, and I'm watching what he's doing. I'm 15, mind you. And I watched what he was doing. I go, "You're not doing that right." And he goes, "No." And he turns around slowly, and he says, "My son, you benefit by my mistakes, that you be a better man." And he slowly turned back and he said it sarcastically and kind of snotty, and looking back over the years, what he was doing was correct, but that's not what I took away from it. I took away what he said literally. My son, you benefit by my mistakes, that you be a better man. Because as I got older and I saw him in a different light, I saw he was human and he did make mistakes. And I tried to benefit from those. You were gone. I missed
I had to let somebody in with the ticket. Okay, so here it is. Troops and Idol. It's a cleverly written album filled with truisms and a bit of psychology. About neglect and the further need in adulthood, endless need of attention. I was wondering, when you crafted that character, Jonathan, in your mind, was he modeled after you, somebody you know, or is that just a pseudonym for rock stars of art?
All of the above. I took 10% of one guy and 10% of another. I thought at the time 10% of me. As years went by, I realized there was a whole lot more of me in it than I gave credit. All writers, all good writers write from truth. So you write what you know. I thought it was a pretty good story because it was very humanized. And I remember we were in Toronto, and I was listening to the radio, and the record had been out a couple of days already, and the DJ came on. He goes, "This isn't a rock album. This is freaking literature." And it wasn't long after that one of the University of Toronto, one of the English lit teachers, taught a semester on the record. So and a couple other universities there. That was a big feather in my cap, because you're trying. I used two models when I wrote that record: Shakespeare and the Bible. Those are the two best writers that I knew, and I tried to pattern it in the same way they phrase things. And I didn't know until just a couple of years ago, William Shakespeare said the same thing, that he patterned everything he wrote after the Bible. So the phrasing of the way things are said in the prose and the poetry, you can't beat it.
It also kind of serves as a warning for those who dare enter the
Yeah, but I think more than anything, the story is in some ways extremely complicated, but on the surface it's very simple, which is what most people identify with. It's just a boy looking for love.
You break it down to prologue, 16
Well, yeah, but you need to flesh out the character to do that, and for you guys to understand who he is, I had to help you flesh out the character. That's a Hollywood term, by the way. You know, when we're basically what it means is give the backstory of the person so people know who they're listening to. Yes, sir. You're up.
Oh, I'm up.
You're up.
All I was going to mention is charisma. The song charisma seems to have. I'm a high school English teacher. So there's so much research done in that. Were you reading something that hit you? How did that?
I'm a history buff.
Yeah.
You know,
So how dangerous?
Yeah, because it's a reoccurring pattern. You know of what world leaders go through. You know, anytime you get guys that are despots, you know, they're certainly type A personalities, but they're megalomaniacal, and they are certainly self-serving, you know, and that pattern develops itself in those people, and it's a repeated pattern, you know, and it's astonishing how it repeats itself over and over and over, and people do what they do because they can, you know, so it's really, it was just a pop 5-minute crash course in history, really, is all it was. Yes, sir.
Since it's your 40th anniversary, any plans for like box sets or vinyl issues, anything like that on down the road?
24, we're going to do an anthology. This past summer, we digitized all of our 2-inch masters from tape onto digital. And it was pretty interesting because I hadn't heard a lot of that since we've done it. And the thing that struck me was the early demos, because we demoed the first album 3 times before we made the record. So that was a total of 4 times. The first set of demos was pretty good. It really was. I mean, it's all the songs, you know, Love Machine, Somebody, all that. But by the time we got to the second set of demos, it was a little bit more polished, but there was a raw nastiness to it. And I listened to those tracks over the summer, and it stunned me how good and how aggressive they were. Same songs you know, just more vicious. And I thought to myself, wait till people hear this. Because by the time we got to the album, quite honestly, you do something 4 times, you're going to start to lose a little enthusiasm. We didn't feel like we were losing enthusiasm. It just kind of happens, you know. So, and was the record good? Yeah, it was okay. But it wasn't until I heard what I heard this past summer, I'm like, wow. You know, so hopefully you guys will feel the same. Yes, sir. Anything?
I remember you saying, I believe it was on Videos in the Raw, you called yourself the Ben Cartwright of rock and roll.
Yeah, I got Haas over here and that.
But along that lines too, your writing, you do really well with the ballads, you do really well with the rock shuffles type stuff like Blind in Texas, even the power ballads like Wild Child and stuff. But do you have a particular style that you really like writing in? Have you gone anywhere with the Ben Cartwright? Just whatever comes out.
No, it's just usually for me it's a title.
Right. So start with a song title.
I try to.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm always successful. I mean, the best ones are the ones you dream.
Right.
Because that's like getting them for free. And I dreamt Headless with lyrics. I dreamt Hold On to My Heart. You know, so those are the best ones because you wake up and they're just there. You know, I've heard Billy Joel say he dreams all his. You know, but because you know they say once a writer, always a writer. You know, so you're constantly writing, even if it's subconscious. You know, whether you know it or not.
Is that something you like almost all the time? Like literally like anytime, anything?
Yeah, because when I got ready to do The Idol, I had a period, there was about a 6-week period of 3 people that I talked to that I had great respect for. One was Chris Christopherson, Pete Townsend, and a guy who used to run our publishing company, who was somebody who was very much in the know. And I got to really sit down and compare notes as songwriters with these guys. And the guy that was my publisher, we were at it was at a wedding actually. And I was telling him, I said, I talked to Townsend the other day and he tells me how hard he works and da-da-da-da-da. I don't know if I can do it. I said, look at John Lennon. Said he wrote Double Fantasy in a month. I said, I can't do that. He goes, hold on a second. He goes, that is true. He wrote that record in 1 month. But he didn't write a song for 5 years before that. He was formulating those ideas for those 5 years. He wasn't actually putting it on paper. And so I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe he's right. So I took what I had from those 3 conversations and I thought, maybe I can do this. And so I kept pushing and finally got it. Yes, ma'am. Nothing?
Any tattoos?
Nope. Yes, sir.
All right, out of all the tours and places you've been, do you have an experience that you just look back on and just laugh your ass off at?
What? Laugh?
Yeah. Like one that sticks out in your mind.
It sounds like you're asking me if there's any Spinal Tap moments. We were in Indianapolis. It was the first time Armored Saint, Metallica, and us. And we were flip-flopping, closing. One night Metallica closed, the next night we closed. So this happened to be one of the nights where we were closing, but we got there late. Nobody got sound checks. It was a long drive from the night before. And so it was an old VFW hall. And all the dressing rooms were in the basement. And it was like a maze down in there. And nowadays, we all know when we go into a venue, there are signs posted everywhere with arrows and punctuating. Well, we didn't have that kind of experience. None of the bands did at that time. So I'm downstairs in the basement, and I'm shaving, I'm looking in the mirror. I hear Metallica's intro going off. And I say, oh, okay, the band's getting ready to go on. So I'm standing there. He said, I got the razor in my throat. Door flies open behind me. It's Cliff Burton. And he's got his bass on. He goes, Blackie, how did I get to the stage? How did I get to the stage? Their intro's playing. And I get the razor in my throat, and I looked up in the mirror, and I go, and I hadn't been up there yet. And I said, Cliff, I don't know. I haven't been up there yet. He goes, oh, fuck you, Blackie. And he runs. I'm still down there shaving. About 2 more minutes goes by. The band's already in the first song, and I hear the bass coming. So, you gotta go. All right. Sorry, guys.
Thank you.